Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Eisenhower, and I'm the Senior Exhibit and Sponsorship Manager at DIA. On behalf of DIA, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Breaking the Protocol Bottleneck, Digital Transformation with CDISC, USDM, and Structured Authoring. This solution provider webinar is brought to you by DIA in cooperation with Docuvera. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping announcements. The views and opinions expressed in the following presentation are those of the individual presenter and should not be attributed to DIA, its directors, officers, employees, volunteers, members, chapters, councils, communities, or affiliates. The presentation slides are incomplete without accompanying verbal commentary. Questions can be submitted at any time during the webinar. Please use the Q&A icon located in the toolbar of your Zoom window. The webinar is being recorded, and within a few days, you will receive an email containing the presentation recording. At this time, I would like to introduce Katja Glass, OpenStudyBuilder Community Manager and Consultant, and Murali Menon, Chief Revenue Officer, Docuvera. Welcome to you both.
Hi, thanks for having this presentation today with us.
Thank you.
So welcome to our presentation on breaking the protocol bottleneck, so the digital transformation with CDISC USDM and the structured authoring. Today with you, we have Murali and myself, and we are going to go through a short introduction about what is the OpenStudyBuilder, to what is Docuvera, and then we will show the integration, including also a demonstration of this. So why are we doing this? We do have the ambition of the digital data flow. So this is a Transinerate project, which is very important for us because it's really about breaking the document paradigm. What we really need, I mean, by now we are still working with the documents instead of working with data, what we are heading for. So for example, when we use the protocol, it's been going through multiple arms, multiple people entering the same information in multiple systems, which is very difficult and error prone. So what we need for tomorrow is really a full digital data flow, where we do have the protocol information available in something like a study definition repository, which then automatically can flow to all the systems. So no human interaction required, instead of really maintaining the data, putting the data in, and controlling the systems. But to really enter the same information in different systems, this is really something we should really get rid of. And when you check out specifically for the protocol, you see this is the core part for clinical studies, which is used in so many other downstream processes. Whether it comes to the EDC system setup, the statistical analysis plan, the CTMS systems, and so on. The study protocol is the one document which is copied and transferred over and over into multiple systems. So this here we have a main problem, and this is what we want to benefit from with the Transinerate Digital Data Flow project. And this is also the main scope of OpenStudyBuilder. So what is OpenStudyBuilder? Actually, it is an open source solution for the industry to establish a single standardized source of truth for digital study design specifications, which really unlocks the data and AI-driven operationalization and really scientific excellence across our digital development. And in the end, actually, it's a metadata and a study definition repository. It has three core components. So on the one side, it's the application itself, which is a web interface. It is a repository where you store all the data. So it's a metadata and the study definition repository. Actually, it's a graph database because all the information is connected. It's not located in silos. It's really connected with each other. And for this, we have decided to go with a graph database. And we also have a strong API layer, meaning this enables interoperability with any kind of systems like Docuvera, EDC systems, and much more. And this API layer is really very, very important for the digital data flow. If we check out the values, why do we want to use OpenStudyBuilder? By having this end-to-end automation, it really enables our enhanced quality and compliance. We can optimize our resource utilization. We can reduce cycle times. A graph system is also very excellent for AI enablement. The API is very important, can trigger automation. We can do very smart integration, specifically as we are an open source project. And this is in the end also to have lower development costs. So what is OpenStudyBuilder actually be capable of? We do deal with very different kind of inputs. Of course, we do have our clinical standards, but also sponsor-specific standards. And then we also do have the different study designs, the outcome, the criteria, the schedule of activities, but also the transfer specifications, collection specifications, quality elements. And all these inputs needs to be managed, harmonized, aligned across studies, across life cycles, and made accessible to the various business processes. And these are very broad, and it's really meant that we parallelize these business processes to optimize and automate. And this goes from study planning through protocol authoring, data collection enablement, data transformation and sharing, and much more. So this is what the final goal for the OpenStudyBuilder is. Where do we stand today? As of today, it's used in production for the protocol authoring part. Specifically, the schedule of activity is the one element from the protocol which is reused in multiple downstream processes. So there we currently have a very strong focus on. But we are also very close to enable the data collection and also support the study planning more, which will come 2026. So what can you do with OpenStudyBuilder? You can manage your standards. This you do in the library. And these are not just the traditional standards like control terminologies, dictionaries. You can also manage your CRS. And very important, you can manage your protocol standards. So harmonize your objects, your endpoints, and also your activities. So what kind of things do you want to collect in your studies? And then next to the standards area, there's also the studies area. Here's where you manage the studies itself, like titles, identifiers, the structure, the visits, the population, intervention, the purpose, and very important, the activities, specifically the schedule of activities. And then there's also a report section. And these kind of things are really important, and you also have to keep in mind, in the background, everything is connected to a flow. As we have a graph model, it's really, you can define your standard once and reuse it in multiple places, whether it's for the protocol definition, the CRF utilization, the EDC specification, and the SVTM and LM definitions. As there is a graph model in the background, and you specify your standards very specifically, what does it mean from the protocol elements throughout the complete life cycle to the LM definitions, then you really can fully end-to-end flow your data and reuse what you have defined. And checking this out, there are a lot of use cases where you could utilize OpenStudyBuilder with. So you have this API enabling any kind of downstream system or also upstream systems to grab information or to put in information. It's a very strong repository we have here, and it's many processes you can automate. And in the end, you can really enable the full digital data flow from protocol development to submission and beyond. And structured protocol authoring is one core part, which is now taken over by Docuvera.
All right, thank you, Katja. Let me share my screen quickly. All right. So just keying off on Katja's presentation, the study builder obviously is managing the study, and as Katja said, there is a play here in terms of bringing the structure that is available in the study builder to a system like Docuvera that can manage that life cycle of that document. So that's what we're going to be talking about here in a bit. Just as a background, I know that Katja touched upon this a little bit, but generally speaking, why are we doing this? What's the market imperative, right? We all know that we are operating in an era of AI and machine learning, but yet the backbone of our regulatory strategy is still very effectively digital paper, which is really static PDFs. And this is really a single biggest disconnect and exactly why transformation ROIs don't find value or are really lagging. So this data on the slide confirms it, right? Because we are simply digitizing old manual processes. And unlike we do have modern goals, but we're kind of stuck in that fragmented system and manual authoring processes. As Katja mentioned, market is isn't waiting for us to catch up. As of yesterday, as some of you know, the ICH M11 guidance was made final, so that's a step in the right direction. But generally speaking, beyond just the protocol, regulators like FDA, EMA, Health Canada, etc., are aggressively moving towards data-centric submissions, things like ECTD and FHIR exports and so on and so forth. They are really signaling the end of a static document era. And if you really want to fix that ROI and meet that compliance, one really has to stop managing files and start governing at a structured level. So for the audience, I'll leave you with maybe two questions to consider is, in your organization, knowing that regulators are moving towards a data-centric submission, if the FDA or EMA asks you for raw content data tomorrow rather than in PDF, is your organization ready? Could you actually deliver it? And I think most of us will probably say no, but I know that there's multiple activities, multiple initiatives at different companies. But if you do know the bottleneck is manual authoring and unstructured files, then the question really becomes, how do we restructure the content? How does it really flow rather than freeze in these silos as we see today? So this is where Docuvera can help. It really starts out with our scalable structured authoring platform. We move you away from managing flat documents to managing governance first metadata-driven content. This really aligns your data with global frameworks before you even write a single sentence, right? Now, everybody wants to use AI to write faster, but even AI really needs good data to learn from. Docuvera provides that structure, the metadata-driven foundation that really makes AI actually safe and usable for life sciences. And because of this foundation that is now structured, we can now layer on intelligence safely on top of it, right? So one example we'll show you in a bit is our co-writer AI capabilities, which accelerate some of your authoring workflows. But more crucially, it keeps the human in the loop. It's not really a black box. It's a compliant accelerator with built-in safeguards. Finally, this approach breaks down silos. We can offer, a life cycle connectivity, integrating directly with other systems in your organization, which is your RIM systems, your safety systems, and so on and so forth. And this really allows us to produce any output that you really need, which can be Word or it could be PDF, your traditional outputs, to more of those digital structured outputs that are FHIR, XML, ECTD, and so on and so forth. So how do we do it? So essentially, if you think back, dial back a little bit, we are really facing kind of a double jeopardy in our authoring process. First of all, operationally, we are really stuck in that copy-paste trap, right? Rewriting or pasting, as Katja mentioned, protocol information across multiple different documents. This is a huge risk. Second, we face the compliance bottleneck, right? We typically treat compliance as a final gate at the very end of a process, slowing everything down. But what if we really thought about compliance not as a gate at the end, but as a guardrail at the start? That is what we really mean by governed at creation. And Docuvera solves both of these problems by replacing these fragmented systems with structured, governed, and reusable content. So how do we do this again? Let's look at it in a little bit more deep dive way. So first, we fix the operational inefficiency. So our methodology is really create once, approve once, and reuse everywhere. So instead of managing multiple versions of the truth, you're really approving a component once, and it really propagates to other documents that have a use for it. This really eliminates the chaos and of version control that you will typically find in a larger ecosystem. The second way we fix this is we fix the bottleneck. Instead of checking for compliance at the end, your contents really is governed at creation time. This means compliance is really built in and not bolted on top of things, right? In other words, it is to say errors are really caught at the moment, they are tight and not necessarily weeks or months later. And finally, by structuring content this way, you gain two massive strategic advantages. One is you typically become very interoperable by design, right? So components created in Docuvera can be reused upstream or downstream. They can be pushed and pulled between systems and so on and so forth. Because now it's digital, it can flow much more easily rather than being trapped in documents. And this is how you become aligned to standards like ECTD, FHIR, and so on and so forth. But you also become AI enabled because this data is now rich in content, metadata, and relationship. And because it's structured, AI systems can then basically use this content and provide the necessary substrate for safe and compliant automation. So finally, let's remember this. We talked about creation of documents, but remember this, that a single product might have one initial submission, but over its life cycle, it will have hundreds of variations and thousands of updates. And if your system is only built for that first submission, or if you have invested in an AI tool that is just drafting that first draft for you using GenAI, it's potentially guaranteed to fail at the update. Docuvera is actually managing the lifecycle beyond that first draft creation, and it's really built for that entire lifecycle. And this is really why this graphic is a circle and it's not a timeline. It really explicitly connects the submit back to the update and connecting it to the reuse element of what we talked about, which in legacy systems, for example, a submission is a dead end. Here, it is really a fuel for the next iteration. And at the center of the circle is your one governed source of truth. So which means this really changes the math of maintenance. So instead of updating 50 documents manually, you update source components once, right? And the system then ripples that change across through the authoring, review, and translation automatically. All right, so let's move into what we're going to see in the solution today. The solution is going to talk about the integration between OpenStudyBuilder and Docuvera. We're going to look at an M11 compliant protocol document in Docuvera. And then we are going to look at certain aspects of the study criteria in the OSB that can then seamlessly flow into Docuvera based upon the digital principles that Katja just mentioned. So just a visual before we move into the demo. Just as an FYI, Katja is going to speak about the OpenStudyBuilder in a little bit. She's going to demo that pieces. But what we're going to focus in that demo is the study criteria section. And the study criteria section is important because the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria, they can actually change over a period of time and are super critical, not just from a protocol building perspective, but even down from a feedback, at the site level, they are very, very critical pieces of information that can have adverse impact on how your trials are run and the efficiency of it, how it is run. Huge cost impacts if your inclusion criteria is not corrected, so to speak. So what we will do is we will take the study criteria from StudyBuilder, we will bring into an M11 protocol in Docuvera. And then today we won't have time to speak about this, but essentially once the protocol is built using our AI capabilities, or you can bring your own AI capabilities into Docuvera, you can then create allied documents from it, which are like the ICS, the CSR, the protocol synopsis, and so on and so forth. And then finally, what we will see is once the protocol is available in Docuvera in a structured format, because all the biomedical concepts, the metadata flowed from the OSB into Docuvera, we can then export that protocol document into a FHIR equivalent, an ICH M11 compliant digital output that has all the codes associated with the solution in it. So again, just walking through this, we will review the study title inclusion criteria and the OSB. We will review the protocol. We'll sync the data. And then once the study criteria is available, we will then export that into a digital protocol. All right, so that's the essence of what we're going to show here today. I am going to pass this over to Katja now so that she can start her demonstration.
Oops, that's the wrong one. So let's first have a look at the OpenStudyBuilder application. So it's an open source solution, so it's all available, and there's also a sandbox available where you can play around. And as mentioned, we do have the study area and we do have the library area. So typically you would start first in the library area with the definition of your standards. And this already starts with a control terminology, because there is, for example, a control terminology for the sex. But if you check out the terms, we only have F and M. But in the protocol, we likely don't want to have F and M visible, but something else, which is probably like the sponsor-specific name, which is female and male. So even here already in the control terminology, there's additional features which you can utilize for the protocol. Then next to the code list, we also have dictionaries, and in the concepts, we have, for example, the activities. So these are the things you do in your study. For example, if you would like to collect blood. So there's, for example, the diastolic blood pressure activity already in there, or the systolic blood pressure. But next to these standards, you also have very protocol-specific standards in here, which is objective, endpoints, and time frames and criteria, for example. And when we check out the criteria, you can already see, you can define it that way that you have the age and then some value, or above at the time of signing the informed consent. So this way you really can make sure that even your protocols are using standards and not generic flexible texts, because what we typically also have is in protocol that you have for the same thing very different texts, which could cause some issues. So in the library part, you're defining your standards, and then on the studies part, you define your study. So first you have to select or create your study. In this case, we are always using the example study, which is typically Dev 0. And here you see all the information. You can check out what is your study, to which clinical program does it belong. You can define the title. You can define the identifiers. So where does it go into the trial registrations? You also have like the properties, what type of study it is. And it's not free text. Here you already have control terminology behind. So it omits free text, meaning you stick to standards already at this point in time. Very important, of course, is also the structure. So which arms are available, elements, epochs, visits. So you have the timeline, you know what happens when. You define your population. So for example, what is the minimum age and so on. A very nice and very important part of the study definition is the schedule of activities, and this you define in this area. And here you really can define in a very detailed level which activities do you collect. But then on the other side, also the protocol view of it, because here you don't want to go into all details, but just highlight the general things like biochemistry, whatever there's in detailed in there. So in this way, you can also contain additional detailed information which you don't display in the protocol, but which are already in your database, which you can use downstream. And another very important part, as mentioned, is the criteria. So here, for example, the inclusion and exclusion criteria, where you even can have a key criteria. So let's check out on how to create a new criteria. You can just press the plus button. This time I want to create it from scratch. I do have some, nope, that's not the one. I did have some text prepared, which is this here. And then I can use, so subjects having a normal, and then I would like to have diastolic blood pressure. So on the next page, I can select which activity I would like to have. And this way you already see it's not just plain text, it already contains meaning in there. So you have a sentence with a logical assignment to a specific activity, in this case, diastolic blood pressure. And in behind diastolic blood pressure, there's a lot of linked information available, which can then be used downstream. So as we have it defined, we will find it at the end of our list, so it's here. And in this case, I would also do it a key criteria, so it can be reused in the Docuvera shown as key criteria. When you have specified your complete study, You can then view your complete protocol elements in the view specifications. So this is, for example, the inclusion criteria, how it could occur. And here we also see our newly added criteria, which is just added in the end. But you also have like the title information, the protocol schedule of activities, the objectives, the endpoints, and much more. And these core information are not only used for the protocol, it's really used in very different places. For example, the first thing where you can reuse this information already is the study design data sets. So in the trial arms definition, for your trial elements, the visits, the trial summary. So just by editing those structured protocol information into the study definition repository, you get these things automatically. And OpenStudyBuilder is also able to represent your protocol information also in other format. A very important exchange format is a USDM. Currently, we are supporting 3.11, but we are also working on the latest version, which is 4.0. And here you can already see, this is the USDM representation, which is not for human, but this is for machines. So if you have other solutions supporting the USDM as an input file, you can reuse it then there. And we also have the ICH M11 export. So the structured protocol information you have managed in OpenStudyBuilder, you can also see here, not in USDM format, but in the user-friendly M11 format with all information. In here, you also have supporting text, which you also can toggle off. So for example, you can directly see the values. For example, this study is a phase 3 style. It has a title. You also can scroll down, which is the objectives, for example, the trial schema, the schedule of activities, the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and so on. But as you can see here, there are in the M11, it should contain the complete protocol. So it's not only the structured information, but also a lot of text parts. And these kinds of information are currently not stored in OpenStudyBuilder. And for this, it might be very valuable to use another tool, a protocol authoring tool, which we can now see for the Docuvera. And as OpenStudyBuilder is having APIs, every other solution is able to grab all the information through the APIs, which really enables very fluent integrations with OpenStudyBuilder. So Murali, please take over, and then you can demonstrate the Docuvera.
Thank you, Katja. Let me share my screen quickly. So this is the interface for Docuvera. So you log in as a user. And the first thing I want to kind of show is we are really a platform. We are talking about protocols today, but the power of Docuvera becomes more prominent as you use content across the life cycle of the drug development life cycle. So a safety section created in the protocol then can be reused in a label and so on and so forth. So we manage those by workspaces. But here today, what we will do is, as Katja showed, there were a few key criteria in the study. Okay, my screen is not shared. Let me share my screen. Okay, I think. All right, I just want to see which screen are you seeing my browser, just to make sure.
Yes, this is the right screen.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So essentially, we will look at the elements that were created in the study builder that Katja created in the study builder and bring those into Docuvera, and I'll show you basically how that all materializes. All right, so we're going to create a new project. Just going to name it something like today's date with version 2, just to identify it easily. And then I am going to select a template. And basically, essentially, the templates drive a bunch of stuff for us. It drives metadata. It drives a lot of content that can be brought and preceded into a protocol, right? So what I'm showing here is a little bit of a different scenario where you would create the protocol from a get-go, but ideally what we want to do is at some point, as once the study is ready in the OSP, you want to just push those documents into Docuvera, right? I'm not showing that today, but I'm just kind of simulating it right now. Essentially, this creation process is something that in the future we would trigger from the study designer. So assuming that happens, essentially what it did really is it took the template information and created an M11 protocol template for us. A lot of the information that you see here are instructional. These are instructional texts in the red that necessarily do not get published outside, once it is exported to a Word or a PDF or even a digital manner, so to speak. But these are instructional texts that have specific purpose. Those specific purposes meaning that the system knows that that section is a protocol summary or that section is a protocol synopsis and so on and so forth, which is very important when you kind of convert and transform this particular document into like a FHIR specification or an M11 specification that we'll see in a bit. All right, so let's focus our attention to the inclusion criteria. So this is the inclusion criteria that we will seed from the study builder. And typically what people would do is just basically in the traditional authoring sense, you would go and add an inclusion criteria one by one. But in this case, because we have integrated with the study builder, we will actually open up the study builder add-on and search for the study that I'm interested in, which will bring me a bunch of results. I know this is the study that I'm interested in, so I'm going to select that and then say continue with this particular selection. So one of the things that Katja mentioned is versioning and version control and so on and so forth, which OSB maintains. So in this particular study, which is a dummy study, it has only got one version, but there could be multiple versions. You can actually select which version you want to sync to. You would select that particular content and then say, I want to now get in all the values that are in the study builder and sync it to this particular protocol template that I have. Now, I'm only showing the inclusion criteria today, but this could easily be your study of schedule of activities table, your exclusion criteria, or study population information, and so on and so forth. So let's do this. Let's synchronize this. This is optional, so I'll just save the configuration. And what it's going to do is it's going to go back and say, these are the available fields that I can sync from the study builder. So I'm going to suggest that I sync the short title, the full title of the study, and I'm going to include the inclusion criteria. I'm not going to include the exclusion criteria because I don't have anything in the study builder today, but I could easily do that if I had more values. And then I would say I'm going to sync these fields. And then what the study builder is doing in the back end is actually pulling all that information from the study builder. And if you notice, these values have actually come through. Now, once these components are available in Docuvera, then this becomes like an editing table, right? You can go ahead, obviously you shouldn't be manipulating this because this is coming from the study builder, but essentially you have some flexibility to kind of move things around, format this as required, and so on and so forth. But net, the idea would be that you would not touch any of those because they're coming from the source of truth, and any source of truth upstream is not supposed to be manipulated in here. All right, so this is one thing. You can also go back and in the study builder, go back and potentially also change some of these criteria. So Katja can add a new value, or if the study definitions have changed and now we are looking at a population of 25 years and above instead of 18 years and above, you can change that. You can go back and resync this field. I'm not going to do this today, but essentially you can resync it, which means that you're again resyncing it from the source of truth versus trying to manage typical version chaos that you see in an organization where there is no control over who is updating and so on and so forth. So this is essentially how the synchronization works. I can look at synchronization history. So I can actually give an indication to the user that, hey, so many versions have happened. So you can actually tell did this happen, at what point? Was it after the database lock or before the database lock? There are many parameters that we can include that is available from OpenStudyBuilder that is available to you. All right, so once this is available and synced into Docuvera, Docuvera's lifecycle management capabilities come into picture. What that means is now you can move this content into some kind of a review. Once the review is completed, you can move it into some kind of an approval. And once that approval is completed, all the components within this particular document now get approved. And either you have an option to send it to a Viva type of a system, or you can then also send a digital version of it, which is what ICHM11 digital protocol is all about. So let's look at that. I'm going to export this particular document. It doesn't have a lot of content in here. I can add a bunch of content in here if you like. Let me just see. I can add another exclusion criteria maybe here. Let's call it as a topic, patients with, I'm just making up stuff, who are age 75. Now, I'm doing this. This is not the best practice because this has to come from the study builder, but just for argument's sake, I'm going to create a new component. And then what I'm going to do is actually export this. Once this is reviewed and approved, I'm going to then actually export this particular document into a FHIR equivalent. Now, this export takes a little bit of a while. So in the meantime, I have prepared an XML that I can show you so that it is very clear as to what this will show if I can move to my screen. So this is the XML that should typically be available once that export happens. So we have to look at a few things in here, right? So we looked at the inclusion exclusion criteria. It had a bunch of notations in here, right? It had 4 criteria in here. So those 4 criteria then have been captured as text within these parameters, right? So you have the inclusion criteria tag, and within that tag, you have all the values that were available. Now, the more important thing here is what happened to the metadata, and that's where the magic happens. So if you scroll down to the XML, what you really want to focus is on this area, which has all the values associated with those inclusion criteria. So for example, if you focus your attention to this section, what has done is it has taken that study criteria, which is called subjects with normal diastolic blood pressure, and then went ahead and pulled all the line codes associated with the diastolic blood pressure, assigned it the value that is associated with it, plus provided the high-low values to it, right? Similarly, on this particular study criteria, it identified this as this particular value along with the correct SNOMED code and the actual text with it. Now, how did it know how to do it, right? So this is where the power of component metadata comes into picture, right? So at a component level, what happened was the component was pulled from the OSP, but it also brought in a bunch of metadata, the biomedical concept, as we say, into it. So it identified that this particular component was an inclusion criteria. It also noted that this was the value for it. And based upon this metadata value, and you can have multiple values associated with it, as you can see, you can add multiple component level metadata to it. But essentially, by identifying this as an inclusion criteria and the value associated with it, the XML then went ahead and said, okay, for this value and this criteria, I'm going to pull in the relevant codes from the relevant systems. These relevant systems can be pulled from like a master data that you may have. You may have your own curated list of control terminologies or vocabularies. We're not bound to anything that we have to use proprietary, but it can easily fit in within the ecosystem of your organization. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this webinar. Kelsey, I can hand it back to you. If there are any questions, we can take it now, or any other things that we can do.
Yes, we have quite a few questions in the chat. Thank you, everyone, or excuse me, the Q&A feature. If you have additional questions, this is a great time to ask them in the Q&A box in the lower menu of your Zoom window. I'm going to start with the first question we have for both Murali and Katja, both panelists, please. Have you incorporated standards or metadata for estimates?
Maybe I can just start. So in OpenStudyBuilder, we currently don't have estimates in. I have to admit, I'm not sure whether it's on the roadmap, but it's currently not in.
Yeah, from a Docuvera perspective, the solution that we demoed today is that the OSP maintains some of those metadata elements, the biomedical concepts that I talked about. But it doesn't have to be the study builder. If you have a standard repository within your organization, that's an area that we can definitely look into. But we would rather use it from a source of truth, like the study builder, versus trying to build something on our own. So that would be my answer.
Great. Do you see a risk in having so much flexibility, for example, to edit or change in Docuvera? How would you trace this change back to OpenStudyBuilder?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So essentially what I showed here is an unconfigured Docuvera solution. In Docuvera, there are concepts around locking components through role-based access control. So anything in our view that comes from a source of truth is something that we would not allow people to edit. It's completely dependent upon your user profile and your access to that content. Not just that, you're also thinking about a larger platform where you don't want to allow people, it's also a reuse platform. So in some sense, you want people to reuse it, but not necessarily modify content if it's not really something that they should have, control over. So again, controllable through permissioning and role-based access.
Great. Can we copy paste the criteria all at once, or must it be entered individually?
I think that's quite a question for me. So essentially, Shruti, what I showed here is that you don't have to copy paste manually. If the study criteria or the SOA tables are available in a study builder, through the integration, you can just sync those values in. And as I discussed, once they are synced, it's part of the Docuvera data model, which means that then you can treat that as a document, go through your reviews and approvals. Now, if you don't have a study builder, and if you have something that's outside, it's maintained in a SharePoint or in a Word document, yes, you can copy paste technically, but maybe not the best practice.
Yeah, and maybe the question was more on how to add these in OpenStudyBuilder. You can create them one by one, or you can import them from a study. So for example, if you have a template study where you have all the common criteria in, you just select the study and select, for example, your inclusion criteria from that template study.
Great, okay. How does the integration handle changes made in OSB? Is there a new version of the protocol created?
So I can take that, Katja. So essentially, the way I would see it is that your revision in the study builder happens over a period of time. And then once the protocol is finalized or at a stage where it can be synced, that draft content can come over as I showed. Updates can continuously happen, which means that, to your point, Joel, if we need to reversion that, we can reversion that protocol that I showed and then start with a new version. You can upversion it and then resync the values. So think about it from a before database log and after database log, right? So before database log, there will be a lot of changes. After database log, the changes are minimal. So at that time inflection point, you can reversion it and then again sync back the final value. You also saw there was versioning in OSB, which means that you can select the right version that you want to sync to as well. And that has nothing to do with the version in Docuvera. You can sync it to the appropriate version as required.
Great. Okay. All right, so this is a long one with ICH M11 targeting step 4 sign-off in late 2025 and FDA already accepting M11 formatted protocols in demonstration programs. Many sponsors are asking whether to wait for final guidance or start transformation now. How does the OSB Docuvera integration organizations for M11 compliance, and what's your advice for sponsors weighing immediate action versus a wait and see approach?
Yeah, maybe I can get started. I mean, the question is, when do you want to start your digitalization? So in the end, the M11 is just one output format of structured protocol information. And the question is, when do you really want to start to work with data instead of documents? And I personally think it's not a question of when, but it's more a call to as soon as possible. Because as soon as you're working with data instead of documents, you really will save a lot of time and have a higher quality and all these things. So I see it a very crucial, important point to switch to the new format. And it necessarily does not need to be M11 from the very beginning. There could be intermediate steps, but really changing from documents to data is the crucial step here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Katja's points. I think from our perspective, I think we also heard news that the ICH M11 guidance has been finalized as of the last couple of weeks, which means that industry is moving towards it. Like FDA or EMA is going to ask for those type of questions going forward, although they are in demonstrations right now. As Katja said, you have to start a journey, today so that you can be prepared when that final mandate happens. There is another advantage of this whole structuring scenario, which we didn't talk about, which is the whole artificial intelligence, generative AI space, right? Where the moment you have these components, or rather these documents in a componentized fashion in something like Docuvera, then you can have a lot more analytics-driven, dashboard-driven activities around Gen AI, because AI requires content to be in a component form to be more effective with less hallucinations and so forth. So it's a journey. There is a lot of change management involved. A program like this will take you time to establish, adopt, and grow. So our advice would be to at least pilot some of these activities to get a feel for what that change might look like.
Great. That's great. All right. Industry surveys show that less than half of clinical operations leaders report sufficient training resources for digital tools, and cultural resistance remains at a significant barrier to CTMS and similar system adoptions. Beyond technology, what organizational change management strategies have you seen work for OSD adoption, and how can sponsors avoid the, quote, technology without adoption trap?
Yeah, so the adoption is really a very crucial step, because it's a main difference for medical writers, whether they work in Word documents or whether they work in any other system. And it's in the end, it's just crucial to really listen to them, to support them, and also to show them what the benefits will be also in for them when they switch their processes. But don't just put it out, here is the system, just do it. You really have to get to them, help them, understand them. Why do they change? What is the purpose? How do they benefit the complete organization? And this way you can achieve change.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Katja said, I think there are several practical training approaches. I talked about change management and adoption. That's a huge piece of what we just mentioned. Typically, what we would recommend is some sort of a phased rollout strategy, which means that you have your early adopters onboarded first, get the adoption right, rinse and repeat, and fine-tune that model as you go along. So absolutely, change management and the human side of this transformation is more important than the tool, and more the reason why you need to get started and think about this sooner than later.
Great. One of the biggest frustrations heard is that when protocols are digitally structured, getting that information to flow seamlessly into the EDC, CTMS, and other registries remains, quote, a city of systems problem within bespoke integrations. How does OSB Docuvera address downstream integration with systems, and what role do USDM APIs play in creating a truly connected clinical technology system?
Yeah, so in the end, specifically the new USDM format plays a critical role in this because the integration is also a key point of concern. So how does it flow? Because we really want to enable this digital data flow. OpenStudyBuilder is very open with the API, so all information you can grab. But of course, this has different formats and different systems require different formats. What we in the end need are systems which are using standard formats. And for this, our standard organizations and also the USDM format comes into play. So this is a specific format on how a clinical protocol should be structured, machine readable. And the more systems we have supporting the standard, the more flexible you will be able to integrate this. So OpenStudyBuilder has an API to the USDM. It has an API to all the single endpoints. And it's an open source solution. So even if something would be missing, people are able to update to their needs.
Yeah, so from a Docuvera perspective, the reason why we chose to integrate with OSP is because of that open nature, because those APIs are available. We are fully cognizant that customers have invested in, ecosystems, homegrown systems, and so on and so forth. But our view is that we need to kind of connect with best of breed solutions. So OSB, in our view, is a best of breed solution for StudyBuilder. And if they can provide us with the API, the data sets, the metadata pre-built, then we use them as a source of truth to bring content into a system like Docuvera, right? Rather than trying to mimic everything that StudyBuilder is doing in Docuvera. So this is where we see the collaboration and the synergy between the two systems. Any integration scenario is customer specific. From a Docuvera perspective, we may not be the best, we may not be the solution for everything that you need to do, but we fit into the ecosystem where there is upstream, downstream systems that need to connect seamlessly with each other.
Great. I think we have time for at least one more question. This one's for Katja. The open source community around clinical trial technology is growing rapidly, with COSA now hosting OpenStudyBuilder and increasing collaboration between sponsors, vendors, and standard organizations. How do you see the open source versus commercial vendor dynamic evolving, and what's the right balance for sponsors evaluating their technology stack?
Yeah, personally, I'm a very much fan of open source. So I really see that when you really have open systems, it's very easy to adopt to your current needs. Of course, the flexibility is also there that it can be very complex when it comes to implementation. But the more open source solutions we have, you also have a high opportunity to create integrations because there is an open specifications of our APIs. If you need for your system integration a specific new endpoint, you can just create a draft and request this to the open source community. And this way, it's really enabling more and more solutions. But on the other side, of course, I mean, open source always comes along with some responsibilities, which companies might not want to take. And for this, the vendors come in. And they can easily provide proprietary software connecting with open source solutions and provide additional services, installation, qualification, and so on. So there is a high opportunity for the completed market to have open source and commercial solutions in parallel. The important thing is that all can integrate fluently into each other, so you can really exchange what is the specific need you have in your company, what is your best vendor, whether it's an open source solution or a vendor solution, so that you really can exchange bits and pieces as you like. So what I really would love to see is like on our mobiles, that we can select either we want to have a free application or we want to have a paid application.
Yeah. Okay. Possibly the most important question of all, how do we get access to these platforms? So Katja answered this question in the chat, but Katja, will you say again for the audience who might not have seen your reply?
Yeah. So the OpenStudyBuilder open source project, we have a project homepage, which is openstudybuilder.com. And there's also the link to our repository where you have installation instructions. But we also have a public sandbox environment where you just can send an email to get access to just to play around. So it's very well documented. It's totally open. And yeah, feel free to visit our project homepage.
And Murali, how about Docuvera?
Also, Docuvera is not, unfortunately, not an open source solution. So please reach out to us. We are more than happy to work with you to figure out what your requirements are, to give you a demo, etc. So there are a few folks on this call who can get you our contact details. We'll send that in our deck as well, but feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so.
There's one other question on the Kelsey. So I think the question really is around how do the environments take care of formatting and style guide requirements. So Shruti, so from a Docuvera perspective, it's all contained within the solution. You don't have to manually format it outside. The subject matter expert focuses on the content and the content only, and the styling of it, the formatting of it is all in the back end, right? It's controlled through style sheets and so on and so forth. So just like I showed you an export of a Fire XML document, you can export that as a Word, PDF, whatnot. Yes, there are GenAI capabilities. We didn't have time to show for it, but those are capabilities. If you're interested, we are more than happy to show you.
Great. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of our presenters. Thank you for joining to the audience. And if you liked today's topic, you should join us for DIA's Regulatory Submissions Information and Document Management Forum, which will take place in North Bethesda, Maryland from February 2nd to 4th in 2026. Be sure to visit DIA's website to view a complete listing of all educational offerings. Thank you again to all and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.